Over the summer, Dr. Fauci was celebrated in headlines that pretended and insisted that he owned Rand Paul at a Senate committee hearing in July, simply declaring that Rand Paul knows nothing, despite Rand Paul having some pretty compelling receipts at the time.
Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly, and I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about.
What was made abundantly clear from this hearing was just how fed up and frustrated some public health officials have become with efforts to undermine the public's trust in medical experts.
Yes, it's the health experts who are fed up with efforts to undermine trust in them. It's not their own contradictions and hypocrisies like this one that undermine trust in themselves. One of the top comments on that YouTube video says, "Oh man, you know you messed up if you get a normally calm and cool guy like Fauci all hot and bothered like this." Yeah, or you know that you've just started scratching the truth. Because for all the celebration of Fauci in that exchange, the more information that comes out, the more it looks like that moment was a poorly aged emotional outburst at best, and yet another outright Fauci lie at worst. And yeah, for many of us, that information was known at the time, but now we have even more evidence. Recall that exchange was about the question of whether the U.S. government, and specifically Fauci's National Institutes of Health, had funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Gain-of-function research being enhancing the human transmissibility of animal viruses, and the Wuhan lab, of course, being the suspected origin of the virus that caused COVID-19. And Dr. Fauci's answer has always been categorically no. Not now, not then, not ever. It did not happen, even though, as many of us knew at the time, all the pieces were there. We knew that the NIH had funded the research of Dr. Ralph Baric, an American virologist who has worked on gain-of-function research in the past, and worked cooperatively with Dr. Shi, the so-called bat lady at the Wuhan lab. We also knew the Wuhan lab did gain-of-function research on its own, and we knew that Fauci's NIH had given money to the Wuhan lab, at least indirectly, through a subcontract with a New York nonprofit called EcoHealth Alliance, which had its own NIH research grant. So we gave money to people who do gain-of-function research, and to the Chinese lab that does gain-of-function research, and we know that these people cooperate with each other, but we were supposed to believe that money never crossed these strict lines, and the sacred honor of these Chinese scientists and their government would prevent such indiscretions. That is not an exaggeration. That is explicitly what Dr. Fauci told us to believe.
So you don't think the Chinese would lie to you?
I know the scientists that we've dealt with have been trustworthy.
You've heard of trust but verify. In Fauci's case, it's trust and never verify, because if you try, you'll earn his righteous indignation and the scorn of his faithful believers. But the trouble for Fauci is, the more verification that happens, the more it looks like he's the one who lied, not Rand Paul, or at bare minimum, like he's the one who apparently has no knowledge of the information that his job is responsible for overseeing. Fast forward to Wednesday this week, and there are two more damning pieces of information that call whatever credibility Fauci has left into question. The first is a letter from NIH Deputy Director Lawrence Tabak to Congressman James Comer, the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. In this letter, the NIH acknowledges it discovered more severe effects of bat coronaviruses infecting humanized mice during research under the grant awarded to EcoHealth Alliance. And through reporting by The Intercept, we know that EcoHealth's required reporting to the NIH about its progress on exactly this research was not conducted properly. Let's talk about this new letter first. And to be clear, as this letter is, this is not to allege that EcoHealth's research is directly responsible for the virus behind COVID-19. That sort of direct connection isn't demonstrated yet. But it is to allege that the sort of research that could result in such things was happening and was paid for by you, the U.S. taxpayer, not just in violation of any standard of decency, but quite possibly in violation of U.S. policy banning such research practices until December 2017 and then heavily regulating them thereafter, and almost certainly in violation of Dr. Fauci claiming that no such thing ever happened. In this letter to Congress, the NIH Deputy Director says, "Thank you for your continued interest in figuring out what's going on with this really shady grant and research. We looked into it and it turns out that in their latest progress report from August, EcoHealth Alliance was testing infecting mice with bat coronaviruses, and they tested the viruses on mice with human cell receptors. And wow, hey, their lab-created virus made more of these humanized mice sicker than the naturally occurring virus on which it was based. But hey, don't worry though, it was all just an accident. It was one of those whoopsies that sometimes occurs in science, just an unexpected result of the research, not something the researchers set out to do, as though an accident makes any of this okay, either as a matter of public interest or as a matter of regulatory policy. Dr. Fauci said this never happened, period. Not this never happened with specific intent to do it. So can we finally say that yes, Dr. Fauci was wrong and we have been funding gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab? Oh, no. Of course not. Just like the ongoing fight between Fauci and Paul, it all just depends on your definition of gain-of-function research. See, this experiment doesn't count as gain-of-function because they weren't infecting humans with enhanced viruses, only mice altered to have human traits. But just because a mouse got sicker doesn't mean it would make a human sicker, says an NIH spokesperson in response to the publication of this letter. Even though the entire point of giving these mice human cell receptors is to evaluate what sort of effect these viruses would have on humans. But even if this was an accident, and even if it does escape the strictest possible definition of gain-of-function research, it doesn't mean that EcoHealth Alliance escapes any wrongdoing here, as the NIH acknowledges. The letter says that even though this finding was accidental, EcoHealth Alliance had a duty per the terms of the grant to report this finding to the NIH right away, and they did not. And as a consequence, we're only finding out about it now and not in 2018 when it actually happened. And if the entire defense here is, oh, well, this was all just a mistake and mistakes happen often in science, that's just the way it goes, then why was it so offensively implausible to think that a scientific mistake, which happens all the time, could be the virus's entire origin? And if these mistakes are so normal and understandable, then why was this particular mistake covered up? Because as additional reporting this week reveals, the cover-up here is much deeper than simply, whoopsie, EcoHealth made a mistake in failing to give proper notice about some small issue 3 years ago. The Intercept had been involved in an ongoing legal battle with the NIH to get all the documentation it could about EcoHealth's NIH grant and Wuhan research through a public records request. And finally, in September, they got it. With a few problems, though. Number one, EcoHealth's 2018 progress report on the research was filed 2 years late, in September 2020. And number two, EcoHealth's 5-year report to the NIH, of course, covering that crucial period of 2018 to 2019, during which they were doing this totally normal humanized mice infection that doesn't count as gain-of-function research. That report is just outright missing. And these reports aren't just done for fun. They aren't optional. They are mandatory per the terms of the contract, with a mandatory schedule for reporting that apparently was not met. According to the Intercept's analysis, it is not possible that the late report for 2018 was simply misdated or a typo, because those dates are automatically generated and because that report cites papers published in 2019 and 2020. So it's either that this report was filed 2 years late, or it was altered at some point in 2020 or beyond. If so, what were these alterations and why? And in either case, either missing or late reports or reports altered after the fact, either would imply some breaking of the grant rules. So why then was EcoHealth's grant renewed for another 5-year term in 2019? Apparently, no questions asked about these discrepancies. The NIH, in part under the leadership of Dr. Fauci, has the obligation of oversight of these grants to ensure that the rules are followed to protect the dollar of the American taxpayer. Gain of function or not aside, the rules were not followed here, but the money was still handed out. So either Fauci lied under oath about not knowing this was happening, or he neglected his duty to oversee exactly this sort of thing. But both would be failures in his job, and both would certainly be deserving of some gestures of accountability. And the cover-up goes even deeper still. It's not just the technical denialism of what counts as gain-of-function research or not, and it's not just the required reporting neglected by EcoHealth. It's also the public propaganda effort of the EcoHealth president, Peter Daszak. You may recall the widely published email that Peter Daszak sent to Dr. Fauci in April 2020, personally thanking him for publicly standing up and stating that the scientific evidence supports a natural virus origin from bats to humans. not a lab release from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Daszak said Fauci's comments were brave and that the comments coming from Fauci's trusted voice would help dispel the myths about the virus's origins. Daszak's damage control went well beyond just that email, though. In February 2020, Daszak orchestrated a letter published in the medical journal The Lancet to condemn the spread of rumors and disinformation about the lab leak theory. Daszak has also served on 2 international committees investigating the origins of the virus despite having a clear conflict of interest. In October 2020, Daszak said in an online seminar that people who believe in a lab origin think there's a cabal of mysterious international folks who are trying to kill people. They come at it with a belief system, so logic jumps out the window, he said. But the only thing jumping out the window is Peter Daszak, terrified to answer any question about what exactly happened here. And again, if simple accident is Peter Daszak's defense for what happened with his research in Wuhan, then why the hostility toward people who think simple accident may be responsible for the virus itself? For all his accusations that everyone else has preconclusions, there is only one conclusion that he'll accept, and he doesn't appear intent on getting you to believe it through reason or evidence. He'd rather have it imposed on you, and you shut the hell up and accept it as told. And remember, we only have this information this late because the NIH and EcoHealth fought public transparency for a year in a court case that they lost. Daszak says it's conspiracy theory outlets and politically motivated organizations that have made freedom of information requests on EcoHealth grants. He says he doesn't think it's fair that EcoHealth should have to reveal everything they do. Well, I don't think it's fair for you to get even $1 of my money under any circumstances otherwise, or really any circumstances, period. But here we are, Peter. That's the nature of transparency. It is good for its own sake, regardless of the supposed motives of the people seeking it. Because if you take public money, it comes with public accountability. Any suggestion otherwise is a claim that you are owed our money without telling us what you're doing with it. And that's an arrangement that's closer to robbery than it is public service. Lucky for Daszak and Fauci, though, accountability isn't just a function of transparency, it's also a function of public will. So the likelihood that either guy is ever held accountable for his demonstrated betrayal of the public's trust is about as high as the likelihood that Peter Daszak's natural virus origin theory is true, not even a hair above 0%. Congressman Andy Biggs asked Attorney General Merrick Garland about a potential prosecution on Thursday.
Under oath before a congressional committee, Dr. Anthony Fauci denied the National Institute of Health provided any funding for gain-of-function research. Today, this very day, the NIH issued a statement contradicting that testimony, which suggests that Dr. Fauci may have committed perjury. This is a criminal offense, and I'm left to wonder if you intend to look into that.
Again, I'll refer to the long-standing departmental norm that we don't comment about investigations pending or unpending.
Too many terrorist soccer moms to investigate, I guess. I notice he has no hesitation publicly commenting on those cases, but maybe if we can bait Fauci and Daszak into expressing a strong opinion at a school board meeting, we'll finally get some accountability in this scandal. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Minds, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.